Welcome to the Josh Calloway Podcast. My name is Josh Calloway. I'm State Representative in the 10th District of Kentucky, and I am excited about what we're going to be discussing for this podcast. I have my wonderful, beautiful wife, Angela Calloway, that is here with me tonight, and we've actually been talking about this subject for a little while, and excited to deal with it on the eve of election. So we're recording this on the eve of Election Day. And it actually fits really well with what is going on in our society. We're going to talk about where does true happiness come from and what's going on in our society with loneliness and sadness and suicide and all of these things. And this presidential election has been unlike none other.
Right.
The divisiveness, all of the rhetoric. We have one of the presidential candidates that has had 2 assassination attempts.
Yes.
And so there's been a lot that is going on. And when this election takes place and when you are watching this podcast, a lot of people will have already gotten the results of the election. And I don't know which direction it's going to go. And I have what I would like to see happen, what I want to happen. But I also understand that there's some foundation in life that regardless of where this election goes, that
it can still be happy.
Yeah, it doesn't have to control my future in regard to happiness. And I'm not taking away from the seriousness of it. I'm not taking away from any of that. But I think it's important to understand that we have got away from some basic things in our society. And we keep hearing this. I think I referenced this before, but we keep hearing this turn the page philosophy. We want to turn the page. And I've said this, but there's some things I actually want to go back to.
Right.
I think that we have got away from some foundational things that create a fulfillment that politics can't feel, that nothing else can really feel other than these specific things. And so I was reading a statistic. I thought about this and was reading this statistic that there are some things that I believe result in unhappiness. And one thing that I think it's important to point out is that in the early 1900s, more than 90% of Americans identified as Christian. And now in 2020, that has decreased to about 64% of people that identify as Christian. And so when you talk about what produces happiness or what results in unhappiness, we have definitely got away from the faith aspect in our society.
Yes. Yeah, we have. We have in school, we have in the home, as our community. And so that's definitely, there's a lack of faith amongst our young people.
And I want to say this, I've never shied away even as a quote unquote politician, which I don't like to be labeled as, but after you've been there a little bit, I guess that's maybe what you become in title. But I'm really just a representative of the people, and we elect one of us to represent us. And I have never shied away from the fact that I'm a believer, that I'm a Christian, and that faith is an important component of who and what I am.
Right.
And so I when I talk about this, I want to talk about it from that view that as a believer and the way that this nation was founded upon Christian principles and biblical principles, that when we get far removed, and as far removed as we have got in our society today, I believe that it's one of the things that has led to unhappiness in people. Because when you think about faith and you think about God, there is a void that every person is created with that is the shape and the size of God, and there's really nothing else that can fulfill it or fill it up. So when people identify as a non-believer, or they don't believe, or they claim to be an atheist, that there is no God, or a polytheist, that there are many gods, and there's no true connection to God, there's the only outcome that could be is unhappiness.
Right, because the very name of Jesus gives hope and cheer to so many. And so when you take that away, then there are some people that are hopeless.
Yes.
And it promotes those types of feelings. When you have a relationship with God, you were taught that you always have somebody that will hear you, listen to you, be there for you, all those things that encompass God and Jesus at salvation. And when you don't have that hope, when you don't have any of that to look forward to, then that can lead to a sense of despair.
Right. And we get the opportunity to minister in different aspects of our community and our society. Yes. And down through the years, I've been able to work in juvenile detention centers. I've been able to work inside of jails and do church services and spiritual counseling and those types of things. And it is unreal, the lack of connection. Here we are in America.
Right.
And I believe this nation was founded upon Christian principles. We know we have a constitution, but much of the constitution that we have was just based on principles that come directly out of the Bible.
Right.
And people left the country that they were in to get away from persecution for trying to worship. And so they came to America for that reason. It was founded on those principles. And yet we live in such a spiritually and religiously illiterate society to some degree. When, I think about how I was raised and heard about Daniel in the lion's den and Jonah in the whale and the
Noah in the ark
and all of these Bible stories. And then I interact with 15 and 16 and 17-year-olds in our society that literally know nothing about this at all.
Right.
And I also find that many of them feel hopeless.
Yes.
So I think that there is a definite connection there. And I know biblically there is, but I think if we look at it from the outside looking in, people that maybe do not believe the way that I believe or wasn't raised the way that I was raised, but I think we can absolutely look at our society and see that something has happened.
Yes.
Something has changed. And America has been one of the largest producers of the Bible, and we run into people in jail and people in the juvenile detention facilities and things of that nature
that have never had a Bible.
Never had one.
And are not sure when you tell them about John 3:16 or, well-known passages, and they don't even know how to find it or to look up a verse. Right here in America. America at one time was known for sending missionaries around the world. That's what we were known for, and getting the gospel to different parts of the world. And it's come to a time where we have missionaries within our United States trying to get the gospel because we have so many that have never heard.
Right.
And especially amongst young people, when you take for granted that they know the song Jesus Loves Me, or like you mentioned, the Bible stories, and they don't. And they don't have anything sometimes their world is torn apart. Mm-hmm. Their parents can't fix it. They don't have, any peers that can fix it. They're, nobody at school. And so they need that message of hope. And they don't have it. Somebody has not told them. And so they are despondent.
Right. And Aaron is not with us tonight, but Aaron, I know, would echo what we're saying. He is a couple times a week inside of jail facilities. Yes. And talking to hopeless people that have no happiness in their life, no fulfillment. They don't know where to turn. And I believe that this has absolutely been a component. One of the interesting things that I read was that there was a major shift in people who identify as religiously unaffiliated. They call them nuns. So it includes atheists, agnostics, those who identify as spiritual but not religious. It rose, and it was 5% in 1972, 29% in 2020 was the last number. So there's been this huge growth of a population of people that are religiously unaffiliated. And so I think if you have to connect the dots.
Yes.
You have to understand that there's something going on. There's something about this that has created this lack of happiness and feeling of hopelessness in people's lives.
Yes.
So faith has been an aspect of it. One other thing that I thought was interesting as I was reading through some statistics is that when we started seeing people who said that they felt lonely or sad or were not happy in life, when we started seeing that begin to rise, we also were right at the point of the introduction of technology.
Yes. So I know that there was a shift in technology in the, mid-90s, early 2000s,
Correct.
But then the smartphones came about. Was that
2010?
Okay.
In that time frame.
And so since that time period, 2010, 2012, something like that, to now, the sense of sadness, depression, anxiety amongst young people has skyrocketed.
Right.
So you can't deny that there's not a connection with their mental, emotional, spiritual well-being, and it's the negative effects that this has had on that.
Yeah. There's two things I think that's important to point out about this. And one is the social media aspect of it.
Okay.
So social media and smartphones go hand in hand. That has been the thing that young people have really been brought into, getting smartphones in their hands primarily for the purpose to interact on social media. So that's one component of it. The other piece of it is that we are more connected than we have ever been. People are. They're connected in every way. They're connected on Facebook and on Instagram and on Twitter or X and all of these platforms, but there's less connection face to face.
Yes, and we need human interaction. We need to be with people.
Exactly. And when it comes to the social media aspect of it, I believe it's important to understand that a lot of the interaction that goes on social media is fake.
So fake.
It's fake. It's not reality at all. But I think we see young people that get caught up in this, especially young people, adults as well. They're adults that they live their life scrolling.
Yes.
That's all they do.
You see people at restaurants and doctors' offices and barber shops and all the places where people used to talk about the weather or the upcoming election or anything. And you see their finger and they're just going and scrolling in an unrealistic world and ignoring everybody that's around them.
Yeah.
And another thing about the social media aspect with young people, it's the time that is spent on it. I think they said the average teenager, 7 to 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. That's a full-time job. Somebody goes to work for 8 hours a day. They're on social media for 8 hours a day, and they're seeing unrealistic things because teenagers love to compare themselves. And if they see somebody else's life but it's not real. You know what I'm saying? They make it look a certain way. So that affects them too with their spirit, with being happy and, having depression and things of that nature.
Well, there's always this trying to compete.
Yes.
They're trying to be as pretty as someone else, trying to be as popular. How many likes can I get on my post, on my picture, whatever the case may be.
And it's addictive.
Oh, there's no question it's addictive.
It's addictive, yeah.
I have, in some of the facilities that I've worked in, I've had people that work in there and people that work as counselors inside of like juvenile detention centers or something of that sort. And they have said that it is as addictive many times as substances are, as drugs are, that one of the hardest things that young people deal with coming in those situations is giving their phone up. They have literally had them laying in the floor, screaming and hollering and kicking, teenagers wanting their phone so that they can see what's going on social media or interact in that fashion.
I don't know what the age, and you may know this, what the average age is now for a child getting a cell phone. I know it's gotten younger. It was used to be 11. I don't know where that's at. I know that you and I had decided with our 5 kids that it was easier to do with Julia. We made the rule, you don't get a phone until you graduate. Okay. By the time the 5th one came along, that was hard. That was hard to stick to our end of the bargain because it was everywhere.
Right.
And she was one of the few that never had a phone, that I had people that thought that we were bad parents because they said, well, what if they get a flat tire? Well, what happened when we got a flat tire? Right?
I called Raymond my brother.
What if they get lost? What did we do when we get lost? We would drive around until I convinced you to go to a gas station and ask for directions, right?
Exactly right.
So it's just the longer you can keep your kids cell phone free, social media free, I'm a big proponent of that. That was our kids' graduation gifts. You got a cell phone and, but like I said, I think they're starting it younger. And so it really is addictive and a detriment, I think, to a lot of the young people.
Well, it is. And it introduces a lot of things as well. I had some statistics and I don't recall them. I wish I'd have looked them up. But the age at which children are now the average age that they are exposed to pornography. And it has got lower and lower. And the whole reason it has is because of devices and social media and those types of things. And I've dealt with children that have got pulled into that, that have been, whatever the case may have been, it was a picture popped up, and before you know it, they're following through and found themselves just completely depressed, devastated. They've been introduced to things that they're not old enough to be introduced to. And I actually was a co-sponsor of a bill that was filed in the legislative session that would ban cell phones in classrooms because we had teachers coming to us saying that they were struggling being able to teach in their class, especially around March Madness time when kids were interested in sports, and that they were struggling with it. And so we have filed that bill, but the pushback that came, and a lot of people made the statement that ship has already sailed and you're never going to go back because this is where we are as a society. And I was able to tell them what you just said. We made the decision as parents to not allow that to happen. And to be honest, I do not regret that.
No. And if you set boundaries in place for your kids driving without a cell phone, then I knew where my kids were going and about what time they should be there or what time they should come home, just like we did when we were, young. I remember one time do you remember when you had that brown truck? He was on his way home from school. I was coming later. I saw his truck on the side of the road. They weren't in it. So I'm driving around. They had ran out of gas. Several people had passed by. They know him. So they drove him to the gas station, got gas, put it in, and come home. There are ways around that. And I think a cell phone is not one of them.
No, I agree with you. And I know there will be people that have different thoughts about this. I'm just trying to connect dots.
Yes.
I want people to understand that's all that we are trying to do is connect dots. We know that when technology was introduced, we began to see a rise in depression and those types of things.
Anxiety and senses of loneliness.
And social media has definitely been a part of it. And I will also say too that I have had mothers come sit down in my office in Frankfurt and have told me stories about how their children got involved in social media and a predator got to them. Yes. And before you know it, they are pulled into things. A young man I'm thinking of right now that literally walked out of his home, left to go get on a plane to go meet someone that he had never met when I say a young man, he was 16, I believe, at the time, going to meet somebody he's never met that he's in love with and been convinced of this through a social media interaction game. And so it's just important. I think it's important that we highlight it, that parents are aware of what is going on. We were able to pass a bill here in Kentucky that required age verification for pornography.
That was awesome.
And so it was big, but what got carved out of that was these platforms that it's not the primary source of their business. So there's still platforms out there that they can be exposed to all types of things. And there's definitely a correlation between this lack of face-to-face interaction. Yes. You don't get to feel the emotion. You don't get to feel or hear or see the tone and the facial expression, and it makes a difference.
Yes. Yeah, you don't learn how to express yourself with people. You don't know how to convey. People don't know how to convey what they're talking about without an emoji, right? So they can't express things. They don't look people in the eye. They seem alarmed if you bring up a conversation. I do it sometimes just for fun. In the doctor's office, I refuse to pull my phone out, and I'll talk to the person that's beside me. And I've gotten, especially from younger people, I've gotten some strong reactions. I'll say, "Hey, how are you today?" And they look and say, "Are you talking to me?" And that was just conversation, getting them used to conversation. It helps so much.
Something else I think that it's important to point out when we're thinking about what has brought this about in our society is family. We have seen an all-out war, an all-out attack on the nuclear family, the traditional family. And I read the other day that 1 in 4 children are being raised in a single-parent home. And I believe that and again, every time I say this, somebody comes out and says, what is your problem with single parents? And look at this single parent that did this. There have been resilient people in every aspect of life.
Right.
And people that have made the best out of the situation that they were in. But when you have 1 out of 4 children that are being raised in a single parent home, a boy without a dad or a daughter without a mom or vice versa, whatever the case may be, that lack of complete structure has affected our society.
It has. And I noticed that some young females really struggle sometimes without having a dad in the home. They want somebody that is affectionate toward them and sticks up for them and provide like what a dad would be in their life. And sometimes that drives them to the wrong company, trying to seek that out.
Right.
I've noticed that with some of the younger girls.
No, that when I think about the way that I was raised and my upbringing, and I will admit that I had it great. You know, I had my mom and my dad were both in my life. I had a great dad, a great mom that provided for me. And I didn't even understand the fact that we struggled, right? Because there was 5 of us boys, and there's like 7 years, we're 6.5 years from the oldest to the youngest. Right. So all 5 of us right there together. And my mom didn't work. She actually taught in the school that we attended and then homeschooled us as well for a period of time. And my dad worked at a factory, and we lived in a 14 by 70, 3-bedroom trailer. So there's 5 of us boys and 2 bedrooms. And we had 2 bunks together and then a mattress under the bottom bunk because it was kind of high that I slept on. So it was my youngest brother, my second to the youngest brother, and then me on the bottom bunk, and then my 2 other brothers, we got the other bedroom, the older ones. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Like, I didn't realize that we didn't have a lot of money.
You didn't realize you were poor until you were grown up?
I didn't realize that. I remember Mom actually adding water to the potato soup to make it go further, And I didn't think about those things because everything was as it should be in the sense that my dad worked and provided for us, and I knew that he loved us. My mom was there for us. I knew that she loved us. And when we were raised in a Christian family, and I'm thankful for that, it molded a lot about who and what I am. Being raised in that environment, I had to make personal choices for myself, which I did. But when I was growing up, it was the greatest thing in the world to have that complete structure. And when I think about children that do not have that, my heart goes out to them. And I'm thankful to see how many of them have pushed through it and made the best of it. But it has taken its toll upon our society.
It has. And it is hard when you have these young people, like you said, it's through no fault of their own, especially if their parental situation, that's out of their control for them. But the ideal family, and that's what you try to explain to some people, ideally is the mom and the dad and the children. And not everybody has that. We understand that, and it's not going to be that way, but that's what works best.
Well, do you think we talked in our last podcast about young men and men in general, manhood? I think that there is a correlation in what we are seeing in society with the lack of leadership and leadership skills in young men to this fact that a lot of them are growing up without male leadership in their home.
Yeah.
Would you agree that there's got to be a correlation to that? And I'm thinking about a young man right now that and I won't say their name, but somebody that we're close to and we're friends with, and their dad left them when they were young, and he has turned out to be a great young man. He's a great leader. He's been successful. He worked his way through college, but there were men around him that kind of filled that role for him.
Yes.
They took him under their wing, and they tried to provide leadership for him and discipline for him and a lot of different things. But it actually changed the trajectory of his life because somebody got interested in the fact that he needed that type of influence in his life.
And that's why community is so important, and church and family, because you may not, we had 5 kids at home at one time, and I couldn't foster kids or adopt kids, but we could lend a hand here and there to do things to help shape some of those young people, fill in some of those gaps that you were talking about, to help those that don't have that necessarily. And if you have people in your community that are willing to be mentors and fill in for some of that, that would help fill in those roles for some of those kids that don't have that.
And it's something I think that we need to, and this is kind of a total different topic, but in legislation, we need to be looking at ways to make it as easy as possible for good people to be able to take kids in. I think about my brother and your sister who are married, and they are getting near their 50s. He probably wouldn't want me to say that, but he's getting near his 50s. He's had multiple back surgeries and was served in the military and got hurt over in Afghanistan and has dealt with that for years on end. But there was a need. 2 young babies. I don't remember their exact age when they got them.
I think they were 1 and 2. They're actually the same age for a couple of weeks, and so right now they are 3 and 4.
And so they've taken them in to raise and trying to provide that atmosphere for them. And statistically speaking, they have a much greater chance to make it in this complete environment.
Yes.
Even though it come from a bad situation, as much as that we can complete that for children in our country, I believe that it makes a difference.
And there are a lot of families that are willing to open up their homes and offer to kids. They may have not been able to have children, or they maybe had, a few, and then they had, years later, like, my sister, your brother, and feel like they can offer a loving environment, but they do make it difficult sometimes for those things to happen, for kids to get inside your home.
Right. And I think it's important to look at that, because if we're saying that this is contributing to the fact that people are not fulfilled, they're not happy because they're missing this element, we need to do everything in our society that we can to structure and foster for that to be the norm.
Yes.
And it is quickly becoming not the norm in our society.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons that it's one of the reasons that I have been a proponent of school choice, is because of some of these kids that are in single parent homes and they have no funding to be able to get them in an environment that would be better for them.
Right.
And so there's a lot to it, but that's one aspect of it. The other thing, before we kind of move into the next topic, is that sometimes I think people, because of the painful life experiences that they have been through, that they have let that define who they are, and it's brought about a lack of happiness and fulfillment because they can't seem to get over what has happened to them.
Yes. And so when you have things like that happen, that are traumatic or, defining times in your life that are bad or difficult, you need people to encourage you to leave it where it happened and don't keep taking it with you. There's a lot of people that have had bad experiences and they have went on to be very successful. Mm-hmm. They chose to, with help and instruction, to learn how to leave that in the time frame that it happened.
Right.
And I think that would be a message to express to some people so they don't just keep carrying that around, because that does create that sense of despair. And
the thing about it is that we walk around in society and we have friends, even people that we are close to, we go to church with, but sometimes you have no idea what that person has been through.
You would be amazed.
And I have sit down and counseled young people in juvenile detention center. And I remember specifically this one young man that I sat down and I started talking to him, and he began to cry. He said, "There's no hope for me. I'm destined and doomed for trouble the rest of my life." He just goes through this whole bleak story and begins to tell me what happened to him. And it was terrible. He had went through abuse, and he had already been on alcohol, and here he is 14 years old. And he's telling me this story. And I sat there, and while I was sitting there, I was there with another friend of mine who was also counseling someone else at the time. And I told him, I said, I would believe you that things are pretty much hopeless for you if I was not sitting here while you're telling me your story, looking at someone that went through the exact same thing that you went through.
Right.
And he's over there telling somebody else, there's hope.
Yes.
There's help.
Yes.
You can make it. Telling them about God and what God can do in their life. And so I think that a lot of people go through things and they just think, I can never get over this.
Right.
I can never deal with this. This is always going to be in the forefront of my life and define who I am. But that doesn't have to be the case.
Right.
But I believe that it's produced that.
Another thing that when we were talking about, with faith and family, things that produce unhappiness, I think that the truth being distorted is something that causes people to be unhappy.
Right.
The deception that is constantly given to us. And I think people deal better with the truth. They're resilient. If you just lay out the facts for them and say it's either this or this, and don't try to blur and do different things, I think people seem more satisfied and happy when they know the absolute truth.
Well, why is this subject so important? There's a lot of things we could be talking about on this podcast, and we are laying out some things that we're going to deal with over the next several months. Why did we choose this one, and why is it so important? This is why it's so important, is that suicide is the third leading cause of death for young people ages 15 to 24. The third leading cause of death. 1 out of 3 teenage girls this survey was done, I think, over the past 2 years. And 1 out of 3 teenage girls have said that they have had suicidal thoughts in the last 12 months of their life. It is sad. That is where we are as a society. That is why I think that we have to get a handle on this. And here we are again up on the election, and there's been so much chaos and so much that is going on. And we are set up for, if this doesn't go in the direction that some people don't want it to go on both sides,
right,
we are set up for more turmoil, more chaos to take place. And we're going to find that we have younger and younger people that are going to be dependent upon medications,
right,
that are suicidal, that find themselves, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but find themselves in addiction and turning to things, looking for ways to fill that void.
Right.
And so that's why I think it is so timely that we understand that 13 out of every 100,000 young people in America commit suicide. And so that is a staggering rate. When you think about this district that I cover is 45,000 people, and a Senate district I think covers about 110,000, 120,000, in that range. So it's not that far away. This affects every one of us.
Right.
All of us have somebody that we know, or somebody that was connected directly to us that has dealt with this type of tragedy in their life. And so one thing leads to another. I remember dealing with somebody that started out just with these feelings of unhappiness, and the next thing you know, they're depressed. Next thing you know, they're not getting out of bed. They're laying in bed all the time. They end up hospitalized, and then ended up trying to take their own life. And that is the progression that takes place if we do not address this issue.
Yeah, and it's more prevalent now. And it seems in the past 5 years that those types of situations have escalated. You hear of that more and more, where they're just people that are in such despair, they don't get out of bed. That's not normal. That's not the way that it's supposed to be.
Right.
But I think that some people, they have friends that way, they have family that way. And so they just think, I guess some people are just destined for that life, but you're not.
Well, this demographic of teenage girls has had a 60% increase in the suicidal thoughts. So when you say that it has increased, it is specifically for whatever reason in this demographic, 60% increase. 1 out of 3 teenage girls. And so we have 2 ourselves in our home. So when you start thinking about that, it gets very close to home.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it is important that we address it, because this is what unhappiness, this is what this lack of joy and fulfillment, and I'm not talking about the campaign of joy, because that
didn't last long.
That only lasted a couple weeks, I think.
And then everybody was garbage.
Yeah, and then we became garbage. So the campaign of joy, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about sustaining happiness, fulfillment that actually lasts. Yeah. And so when that is prevalent in our society, we know there is suicide, and the suicide rate increases. I believe there's a correlation also with substance abuse and with drug use. So we have seen that the second leading cause of death for men from about 18 to the 45 age range has been fentanyl overdose. And a lot of those people, it starts out as they're depressed. They're looking for something to help them cope with life. And the next thing you know, they're addicted to drugs. They may start off with something with pills. It ends up into substances that they cannot control. And there used to be a time back in years past, decades ago, when there were people that considered themselves functioning addicts. They could take substances and maybe go to work or work a job or whatever the case may be. The stuff that we have on our streets today,
it makes people out of their mind.
There's no functioning on it. It literally takes you to the bottom within no time.
Right.
And we are seeing people all across this country that are dying from overdoses because of the fact that they're looking for something that fulfills, something that brings about true happiness. And so this lack of happiness, this lack of fulfillment, it has produced suicide at rates unlike we have never seen. It's produced people that are dependent upon substances. And I believe there's a correlation with confusion as well.
Yes.
So you were talking about the truth, and I wasn't trying to move away from that. I actually wanted to move into that a little bit.
Okay.
That we were having a conversation earlier that people just want to be told the truth. Yes,
they do. And kids especially. Kids want to know the truth. Kids are resilient. You know that. We've had 5. We have grandsons. They can cope with a lot if you tell them the truth. And when you try to skirt around it and do different things, it promotes confusion. And they don't like to be confused.
Yeah.
And so you were talking earlier about with the teenage girls. Teenage girls always go through probably maybe junior high starting, but especially in high school, they want to fit in. Mm-hmm. They want to be popular. They want to be recognized. They want to be celebrate. They just want they're trying to find their identity, figure out what's going on. Right. And so there's always been something with teenage girls. For years, they dealt with anorexia and bulimia, mm-hmm. okay, which is a mental condition, meaning they think they're fat and they're not really fat. And if they go to a counselor or go to a therapist, if those young ladies would go to that counselor and say, I'm fat, and they can tell by looking at them, the doctor or the therapist would make the diagnosis and say, you're not actually this. They say, when I look in the mirror, I see myself as fat. Those therapists don't affirm that and say, yes, you're fat, and we're going to call you fat, and we're going to put posters up and celebrate you in school that you are fat. What do? If they go in with anorexia, they try to get them back to reality.
They tell them the truth.
You're actually underweight and you're hurting yourself. And we need to get you help so that you'll stop this process because you're damaging your body. Okay?
Right.
So any of those types of disorders, that's how that's been addressed until now, when teenage girls see this LGBTQ movement or trans movement. And when things come on the scene, it becomes almost like a fad.
Right.
And so this is the only type of disorder.
Oh, don't ever say it's a social contagion, because people will tell you that you've lost your mind.
But it does. Because it's
There's
the popular
direct
thing.
Correlation and with the social media and all of it.
It is. And so they see somebody on social media saying they did this, and they seem this epitome of happiness and things, so they want to try it. So they go to the therapist and they say, I feel like I'm a boy. I've always felt like I'm a boy. The therapist doesn't do what they would do if they came in with anorexia. They say, okay, do you want us to call you he, him, Tom? Okay, so it's the only thing that they get to self-diagnose, right?
Right.
And then the only disorder that's celebrated.
Exactly.
And they say, go to this club and we'll call you whatever you want. We'll put posters up. And so when teenage girls are struggling, like they always have, because they're changing at different things, they need somebody to tell them the truth.
Exactly. And this is the thing, and I know what's going to happen when I say this, and there's going to be people that criticize this and have plenty to say about it, but the truth is the only thing that makes you free.
Yes.
And so there is a direct correlation, the social media contagion aspect of it, the fact that 1 in 3 teenage girls
yes,
or have dealt with suicidal thoughts, the fact that it's mostly girls that identify as boys instead of the other way around. That is what we're seeing as a trend in our society. And the fact that there's also an increase, people will say that there's a greater risk for LGBTQAI plus adolescents to commit suicide, and they say it's simply because people bully them and they don't. It's not about that. It's about the truth. It is about the fact that they're trying to find something to fulfill them and to bring about happiness in their life. And
when you're in a confused state and have confusion in your life, I don't need somebody to help my confusion.
Right.
I need somebody to give me truth so I can be brought back to the middle and figure out what I need to do. Kids can cope with it. I know there's a lot of studies, and the message that some people put out is if you don't affirm these kids, if you don't let them change their body, if you don't do these things, they're going to kill themselves.
Yes.
Some people have said it. I can't remember the exact phrase, but would you rather have a dead son or a live daughter? Because basically, if you don't let your son transition or your daughter transition, they're going to die.
Right.
They have said that. And that's not true. That is not true. Any other disorder, it's a disorder.
Right.
If you think that you're something that you're
no,
not.
That's exactly right.
And so if they come to you, if my kid comes to me and says, hey, if Jenna said, I think I'm a boy, I'm not going to say, well, why do you think you're a boy? Should we go ahead and get you, some dump trucks to play with and do this to see if you think you, no, okay, you're not a boy. You're Jenna, you're a girl, and tell the truth.
Right.
Always bring it back to the truth. And you're going to have a lot of kids when the time comes.
It's coming.
And they're going to be very angry at their parents for what they allowed to happen to them.
I have said this many times to these medical, quote unquote, medical facilities and these butchers that call themselves doctors, that the best thing they could be doing right now is lawyering up, because there is a backlash that is coming.
Absolutely. Because when a child is 3, 4, 12, 13, all those things where they cannot make competent decisions, we don't let them vote. We don't let them drive. We don't let them carry weapons. Mm-hmm. We don't let them use any type of substance. There's age limits on all of that. But you're telling me that you're letting these little ones make these decisions, and when they get old enough to realize that they have irrevocable damage to their bodies, mm-hmm. they are going to be angry.
I've already seen it. I've dealt with it when we passed the bill that we passed that ended the gender reassignment surgeries in the state of Kentucky. And I worked with some detransitioners, and I think about specifically Chloe Cole, who has gone all over the country and tried to advocate for these young people that are confused and they're being deceived further into thinking that somehow that they're going to be able to find what they are looking for, this happiness, through going ahead and transitioning. And she has done her best to move on with life, but she said that I deal with pain every day. I look at myself and I think, how could they have done this to me? How could they have let me go through with this? And so it is happening.
You have little girls that are going through some of this surgeries. They call them top surgeries, do different things, take these puberty blockers and different things. When that young lady is 27 years old and decides, I do want to be a mother. I want to have a child. I want to breastfeed my child. And that decision was taken away from her.
Right.
Supposedly for her good, and they did not act in their best interest. And they are going to be very upset.
That's right.
When that day comes.
That is right. And it just promotes so much confusion in our society. I thought about, I think it was today that I saw a news clip that boxer in the Olympics, that they got the results back from their testing, and it's actually a guy.
Of course.
Everybody knew it was. They were trying to act like that there was some type of problem there or whatever, and there was a confusion, about it. There was no confusion. They knew all along that it was a guy. They let the guy get in there
and beat up a woman. And gave him a trophy.
Confusion. That is what comes as a result of this. It produces confusion, and it's why we're dealing with the suicide rates, the depression, the drug use, all of that we're dealing with. This is why.
And the Bible says that God is not the author of confusion.
That's correct.
And so then that means that the opposite, the devil, Satan, keeps people confused.
Exactly right.
And that puts them in a dangerous position, because then they make choices and life-altering choices based on confusion, and you can't do that.
Right. No, I agree. And we'll kind of wrap this up, because we've talked about unhappiness and what causes that, and then what does that cause? What does that produce? And so many things we could sit here all day and talk about it. But what actually produces happiness? Where is real joy, not Kamala joy? Where is real joy actually found? Where's it at? And when I said that, and I've made it clear that I didn't support Kamala Harris' campaign. I'm not going to. I haven't.
I'm not either.
I've made that clear, and there's been some people talk about the fact that you might, if I hadn't been looking over your shoulder, there's no telling who you voted for. And I responded to that with, actually, y'all were staring over my shoulder and told me I couldn't come home if I voted for Harris. So anyway, that didn't really happen. That was a joke. So before somebody tries to pick it up and say that I was putting out fake news.
Yes, I do want to clarify that I am able to vote. I have voted since I've turned 18. I have driven myself to the polls in the front seat, and I plan to do that tomorrow. Just wanted to clear that up.
Will you drive me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
You have to sit in the back, though.
Oh, I do. So this is how this works. It's actually reverse, right?
Yes.
So where does this happiness, where does it really come? And we're going into this election again. When most people watch this, the election probably will be over, or we should be getting news about the election. So if it doesn't go your way, what are you going to do? Are you going to fall into depression? I remember that there was a man that I worked with when I was young, and we did construction work, and he was a retired gentleman, and he was very knowledgeable about what was going on in politics. And
are you going to talk about Bill Clinton?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
I remember something like that too when I was a teenager.
And he cared a lot about our country. He was a veteran, and he was a cut guy for a construction company that I worked with. And I remember when Bill Clinton got elected, that he actually dropped his flag to half staff, and he literally sat out in a chair and cried for a couple weeks.
Yes.
Because he thought it was the demise of our country. And there's no doubt there were things that happened during Bill Clinton's administration that were not good. So, but he really had wrapped his whole emotion up into that election. And here we are at another election that people have wrapped their emotions up in.
Right.
There's belligerence to some degree, sometimes on both sides. On one side, it's absolute hate. I mean, they literally say we're garbage.
Yes.
If we support Trump, we're his supporters. And this is the thing. There are policies that I am interested in that Trump supports. And there are things about him that I don't like, things that you don't like, things that he probably wouldn't like about me at all. But it's about policy to me. So that's why I'm voting the way that I'm voting. But people are so emotionally vested in this election to the point that there's fear in the hearts of some people, not just about the outcome of the election as far as who gets elected. There's fear in my heart about where we could go if Kamala Harris got elected and she does the things that she said that she supports in the past.
Yeah.
She does a mandatory buyback on our guns. She allows to pay for transition surgeries for illegals that are in jail.
She's kept our border open.
Kept the border open. She supports abortion with zero restrictions on it at all.
And says that it's reproductive health care.
Correct.
Abortion is not health care.
No, it's murder.
It is.
There's no question it is. And so there is fear about policy and the direction of this country. But there's a lot of people that have a lot of fear about the reaction. How are people going to react and respond based on how this election turns out? And this is what I think it's important for people to understand, and I'll speak for me, is that my hope is not in the White House.
Right.
My hope is not in the State House.
Right.
And so I am troubled. I am burdened. I will fight for policy that I believe produces the society that I want my kids and grandkids to grow up in, and the other kids and grandkids across this country. But at the end of the day, hope is found, first of all and foremost, in faith in God.
Right.
So we put our trust in him, we put our faith in him, and we believe that he knows, that he sees, that he's sovereign. Right. And so here we are on election eve. We don't know what's going to happen, but we know that he knows.
Yes.
And so we put faith in that. And if you want to experience true happiness, true joy, then there has to be a connection or a relationship with God. There has to be that connection to something that is above you, that is bigger than you,
right?
That is beyond you.
Right.
Do you agree? I know you agree, but do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, because we were created to believe in a higher power, right? And so when you don't, it actually goes against your nature. But we have our hope in God because it says that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he is trustworthy. We can put our hope in him. Doesn't matter who gets elected. We want certain things and outcomes, but we still have that hope and that foundation in Jesus Christ.
No, that's right. And I think it's important for people to grab a hold of that. And we just came from a prayer at a flagpole
in
Cloverport. And one of the people that helped put that together, he made this statement. He said, I feel like that our society has become so much more secular, that we have got away from God and a relationship with God and those types of things. And it was just really surreal to hear him say that. And he even, went on to say that I haven't went to church like I should and like I want to, and began to talk about things in his own personal life.
Yes.
But that recognition and realization that this is really where the foundation of our country's at.
Yes.
And as long as that foundation stays intact, we have hope.
Yes.
So I think that is an important aspect. The second thing I believe is that regardless of the outcome is family. We have each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we have friends and family that I will be a part of their life. They will be a part of my life. We will support each other. We will stand by each other. We'll help each other go through whatever we face in life, as we always have.
Yes.
And that has brought, I remember when our fourth child was born, so our third son, Jake, and when he was born, he had holes in his lungs. And as soon as they delivered him by C-section, I could tell something wasn't right, but I didn't know what was going on. I could just tell by the way the nurses were acting. And they immediately began to do work on him, and they said he wasn't breathing. I noticed that he was really purple. And so they started going, and they got him breathing a little bit. And they didn't even know what was going on at the time, but they called immediately for an ambulance. I can't remember which hospital. We were in Louisville, but I remember.
I was at Baptist, and they took him over to Cosair.
They took him to Cosair's immediately. And I remember I got over there, and it was the weight of what was going on. You couldn't come because you had just had the C-section, so you were over at Baptist. I'm over there with him at the hospital because you wanted me to be with him. And I remember the doctor came in and she said, Mr. Calloway, she said, I have done everything I can do. I don't know what else to do. And I don't think he's going to make it through the night. And I remember I got down by the bed. Here he was, like, I think almost 9 pounds.
I think he was 9'2".
And he was right beside a little baby that was barely a pound. And they're telling me how good this baby's doing. And here he is, looks healthy and big. And they're telling me they don't think he's going to make it through the night. And I remember kneeling down by a chair right there beside the incubator that they had him in. And I was praying, God, save him, save his life, help him, heal him. All these things, God, I want you to do these things. And I remember stopping and saying, whatever you want to do here, whatever you want to do in this situation, do it. And I'm going to trust you with it. And immediately there was this weight somewhat that was lifted. It was like, okay, he's in control. And this was like 10:30, 11 o'clock maybe. And about midnight that night, I walk out into the waiting room, and in walks like 14 or 15 people from our church, some of my brothers and their wives and best friends. And they just came up there on a Wednesday night at midnight and just sat with me for an hour and a half. And it brought about this sense of hope and happiness and contentment and peace that everything's going to be okay.
Right.
And I'm thankful that God turned it around. That doctor came in to me a little bit later, and she said, I think I'm going to lose him. I have one procedure that I want to try, and if it doesn't work, I don't have anything else to try. And so she tried that procedure, and I remember through the night, he went from 100% life support to 80% life support to 60% life support. And maybe 12 days later, something like that, we got to take him home.
We got to take him home on Christmas
Day.
Yes, best present ever.
But my point is that no matter what we face with faith in God and with family, we can make it through it. We have each other to help make it through it. The other thing you brought up, the attack and the war on truth and confusion and how that produces, I think facts are important. The truth. Keep the truth in your life.
Right.
We have God's word. We have what we know to be truth in our society. And don't allow yourself to be deceived, and don't get sucked in and pulled into all of this fake facade that is out there. Because there is just peace that is found on facts.
Yes.
On truth.
And the truth, like you said, will make you free. It will help you make right decisions. It will calm you. There's just so much that can be said about knowing the truth. And kids don't want to be lied to. Nobody wants to be lied to. Mm-hmm. And so just make the truth a preeminent fact in your life, and especially to kids.
The final thing that I'll say is it's important to have fulfillment in life is to have a future. You can't just live in the here and now.
Right.
We live in a purposeless society, especially it seems like with young men. We talked about that on the last podcast, but teenage young men and young adults that they're getting 24 and 25. They have no idea what they're going to do with their life.
Right.
And they have no purpose. You have to have a future. And that is one thing that has driven me to run for office.
Yes.
Was focusing on the future, the voice for the future of our children. That has been so important to me. And the times that the pressure has been on the hardest, the times that it seems like that I just wanted to walk away and quit, that has been one of the things that has kept me going, is how is this going to affect our kids? How is this going to affect our grandkids?
Right.
And if we give up and quit now, we will leave them with maybe a society that cannot be repaired.
Yes.
That cannot be fixed.
And we will leave them with almost for sure a sense of hopelessness and not able to be happy if you don't keep fighting for the future generations.
Right. I don't know if this helps you at all. It's been good for us to have this discussion.
Yes.
And I do want to remind everybody that we need you to like and share and subscribe our podcast. If you want to communicate with us, you can do that at joshcalloway79@gmail.com. If you got subjects that you would like for us to discuss and talk about, we'd be glad to do that. We have some things laid out. We want to get past the election, and we will be past it this week. And so we'll have several things that we're going to discuss, and I'm sure the outcome of the election is going to be one of them. And I don't know what's going to happen on tomorrow, but I do know who holds tomorrow.
Amen.
And because I know that everything is going to be all right.
Yes.
That doesn't relinquish us from our responsibility to do all that we can. And I say this often, that we know what the outcome is going to be, in the sense of that we have the end of the Bible that tells us how things are going to turn out.
Yes.
But our marching orders never change.
Right.
So it's no time to give up. It's no time to feel hopeless. There is hope. It's found in faith. It's found in the facts. It's found in family. It's found in having a future.
Yes.
All of those things you can build your life upon and have hope for the future.
Hope and happiness.
That's right. And so until next time, God bless. Again, make sure that you share, you subscribe to this, that you like the videos, get them out there, share them on your own social media platforms. Let people know that we're trying to speak the truth and get the truth out. If I make it through the election on tomorrow, I plan on doing this through the legislative session. So we'll try to keep people up to date as to what is going on. If you have ideas you'd like for us to talk about, make sure you let us know. Thank you, and God bless.